Hi, welcome back to Plan B Works. I'm so glad you could stop by. Today we're going to create 11 cards using 6 pattern papers as part of our card series where we are going to use and focus on pattern papers. Now, last week we created this lovely card and I hope that you guys were able to give it a watch. It has a lot of information, basic info about creating your very own cards using pattern papers. On that video, I also introduced this template from Don Lewis. That's very good for beginners. You can see here that all the card sketches are already laid out and all of the patterns for each card to create as your panels and backgrounds are already here. So you can see the number 1 here corresponds to the first card. And there's a number 2 here that corresponds to the second card that matches with the number 2 on the second pattern paper. I know this is a lot to take in and to manage right now, but I promise you it will all make sense once we start cutting the pieces of the pattern paper, putting them next to our card bases, and just putting them together on our card. Now we have here all these little pieces, for example, 4 purple pieces that go on that card number 4, and all those little pieces has number 4 on them, which is great because all you need to do is follow this template. And obviously at the end of the day, it is your choice on which cards or which designs you feel will go better. But this is going to serve as a guide, especially if you're a beginner. And this will be easier to follow once you have all your materials laid out in front of you. This is just one guide or template, but I'm sure you can find many resources online that will offer a lot of inspiration and a lot of guides and templates as well. For this card, I'm going to use this Birthday Bash pattern cardstock pack, and you can see here it's a bunch of cardstocks. It's one-sided. And what I love about this cardstock specifically is that it has guides on the top portion. It tells you which pattern papers actually, or pattern cardstock, go together. For example, this stripe one has the same pink color palette that this next cardstock has. So you can use them together, and even if the stripe design is a little busy and so is the pink one, it still matches together because of the same color palettes like I discussed on the first video that we had. Now you can see here, for example, if I use the second pattern paper on with the first one as the card suggests here on the sketches, it will still look very nicely together because it has the same color palette. And that is the same strategy that I've used in creating or choosing all of these pattern papers together, because as you can see, that hue of pink is also present in all of these letters and all the other patterns that you will see later on. It's the same hue of teal, the same hue of purple, mint green. Even on these fireworks and little stars, you will see that a hint of all of these colors are present on each of these pattern papers, which makes it easier to put together and design. Now obviously the next step would be to cut them according to the sketches that were laid out on that template, and you can see here that I followed exactly that because I wanted to put that template to the test on how it will make my card making easier, or how it will make the patterns correspond nicely to each other. Now you can see here that the card number 1 here is just one panel, and I've already got that. Now the second card will have 2 panels, a big pink portion and a small stripe portion matched together. Again, this is all a lot to take in, but don't worry because once you put them together, it'll all make sense. Just make sure you don't lose any of these little pieces because they will all form part of the card, so no waste at all. And this is how it all looks once you cut them all up to pieces. But again, it still looks lacking, and what is lacking here are our card bases. On my first video, I shared my strategy on how I use or how I pick my card bases to go with these colored pattern papers. Now, just to give you a quick recap on that, I just pick one color from the design on the color palette that these pattern papers have, and I choose that card base to go with it. For example, this one has some mint green in it, and I'm going to use that mint green card panel or card base to go with it. Now you can either use it as a contrasting color to accentuate the color pieces, make them pop, or use a milder color just so it will blend in and complement the colors that are already present there. All right, so these are all the cardstocks now that I have, or the patterns that I have on their card bases. As you can see, it's starting to make sense now, but at the same time, some of the pieces are just too loud to go together. For example, these letters and these candles, I just don't think that they mix very well. And that's all right, because there are a lot of pieces that have about the same size. And at the end of the day, like I said, these are just guides, and it's all a matter of taste and design. You can mix and match them, but the idea is not to waste a single piece of these papers. Now this is how my final turned out to be. These are all the card bases that I use with the card panels and all the pattern papers that go with it. As you can see, it's slightly different, but all the pieces are still there. And we are going to start creating all of these little cards in a little bit. I'm not going to go and show all of the cards, how to make them all at once. I'm just going to start with one, and we're going to go on with the rest, explaining them one by one instead. Now you can see here that I'm using a stamp from Altenew. This is a free stamp that I got as a thank you for my orders. And I love it. This is one of my favorite stamps. This is a daisy. This is a bunch of daisy flowers. And instead of using my black ink, I'm going to use my Gina K Premium ink here in a gray tone. The reason for that is sometimes when I use my black ink, it's just too crude, and it stands out too harshly on the background, especially if I'm using white. Therefore, by using this gray ink to stamp the image, it's a little lighter to see and to look at the daisies, especially because I plan to create white petal daisies. So as you can see here, when it comes out, that if I start using my Copic markers to create the white petals, the grays on the petals will blend nicely with the gray ink that this stamp pattern creates. Now usually I would create or stamp 2 images at once in case I mess up the other, but since I didn't, I'm just going to probably save that for another project or one of the cards that I'm going to be creating here today. Now I have this die cut word celebrate, and this is from that set that you can see from the corner. And I've had that forever. It's one of the first ones that I've had when I started making cards and crafting, and it holds up. I've had it for many years and it's still in very good shape. Now I'm just choosing here the color palette that I would like to use for my daisy, for my Copic markers. I always say this and I can't emphasize this enough. If you're going to create a lot of these focal points for your cards and you plan to stamp them or draw them, you're going to want to use mediums, a medium that you're most comfortable with. For this one, I'm using the alcohol markers just because they make such bright colors, but obviously you can use colored pencils, you can use ordinary markers, crayons, whatever it is that you're most comfortable with, as well as watercolors. Obviously you need to use the right kind of paper whenever you choose the medium, whatever medium you choose, so you can get the best results for it. Now, as I was saying earlier, I use the gray ink to stamp the images just because now, while I am using my gray Copic just to spread that out and blend it in, it's not too harsh to look at, especially because I am creating a white petal. And because it's a white petal, I don't want it to be too white or too gray. I want it to have a shade of gray just so it has that bit of shade to it, but not completely. Now as you can see, after I've done all the coloring, it turned out so nicely. I love these daisies. And I'm just going to cut the edges, not too close to it. I always leave a little bit of white in there because it looks a little bit more like a die cut image or a sticker. And to make it pop from the background, because the background is a busy stripe, I'm just going to add some foam tape to this and just stick it right there in the middle of my card panel. And by doing this, I can focus more on my focal point instead of creating a very technical or a very complicated background. Because by then, I can make 11 cards immediately and have to just focus on my focal point. And as you can see, I'm just putting in my foam tape here to create some dimension and to make those daisies pop. And just like that, our first card is finished. It's that simple. And it's a very simple card, but I love how it looks because there's so much color in it. And it's so simple and it creates some dainty mixes of color. I love it. And now, like I said, I'm not going to go through how I created each of the cards. And I know when you look at it from this point, it's a lot to take in. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at each card individually, see how they were built, and how they ended up side by side next to the template that we plan to do. Now you can see here our first card. I just used that big blue panel right there of stripe and created that focal point, which is a daisy right in the center. And it's so simple yet so lovely. I love exactly how it turned out. The second card here, instead of putting the focal point in the middle, I used it on the side, and I loved how it turned out because the eyes move from left to right nicely. And I love the pink daisies as well. I think it goes nicely with all the pinks that go with the card. The third one here is one of my favorites. I love that party, party, party. I changed the layout of the little card panels here, mostly because I wanted to make room for all the little balloons. And I think it turned out so well. It looks so festive. Now the fourth one here, you can see that there are these little bit of pieces in the bottom that's supposed to belong to another card, but I think it'll look nicely here. I used the Altenew stamps here with coordinating teal and mint green, and it looks so cute. Now this one I had to create that bare focal point right there because the letters were so busy to look at, and I had to make sure that the sentiment would pop by using foam tapes to create a dimension, and it turned out great. For this next card, I used that pink panel to die cut a flower instead to create that, and I added a gold card panel to die cut to join the flowers instead. I loved how it turned out. Now for this one, the peach card, I split it in two and put it side by side and embossed it. I feel that it works better that way, and I love how all of those candles and balloons turned out. It's just so festive to look at. For this one, I used the same color palette in the background of the fireworks with a teal, pink, and hot red to color that hot air balloon, and I love how it looks. It's just so cool. For this card, I split that purple panel in two and then used a different card strip and took away all that three boxes in the bottom and heat embossed the daisies in the bottom. I think it's subtle but very, very cute. For this one, I just moved the green panel onto the left, added some balloons and some die cut words, and I love how festive it looks. And finally, this is just a horizontal orientation of this card, and I added some gold cardstock to join the sentiment right there in the middle, and I think it's perfect with that color combination as well. Now I do have to say that using pattern cardstocks and creating all of these 11 cards had its ups and downs. Some parts were a bit tricky, especially when the cardstocks were a little bit tougher to match together. But at the same time, I love that I had like barely an inch of waste in creating all of these 11 cards. And I think it brings out your creativity because all you need to do is focus on your focal point instead of designing the whole thing from scratch. And it just brings out a different level of creativity when you're creating your cards. So this whole month is all about pattern papers, so we're definitely going to create more cards using them. So please like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our fun videos right here at Plan V Works for more affordable crafting, resourceful hacks, and easy techniques. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you guys next time.